Dear Keith, it's Friday. It's Friday. Why don't we actually? I'll tell you what. Let's listen to our favourite people from New Haven, Dandelion Charm, and they'll charm you all the way to the bank.
It's a tightrope walk on an ice age, honey, and you can play that game, but it won't be funny for long. For long. She's high, she's a skywalker, doesn't matter, just focus your mind on the wire ahead, it doesn't matter, it's a long way down, long way down. So you place your foot to assess the tension and convince yourself to continue knowing it's wrong. Oh, it's wrong. It's wrong. But when she's high, she's a skywalker, doesn't matter, just focus your mind on the wire ahead, it doesn't matter, it's a long way down.
Dandelion Charm, Claire and John. Catch them locally if you can, because they're on the way up. I can see it won't be too many years before we're all scampering for tickets at the O2 to see this couple. They are very, very good, and they write their own stuff. So, Dandelion Charm, out of New Haven, one of our own, as it were. Now, just going back to what broadly the national commentators are saying about local media and local governance. Essentially, the theme is that the less local media you have, the worse local governance you have, and the costlier it becomes. And certainly that seems to me to be what's happening in Lewis District. However, the other point that it makes is, yes, in the old days, the poor old journalists had to go to dull council meetings and listen to dull, ordinary stuff. They had to go into the courts and hear about shoplifters and people who had broken into cars. And they had to listen in the council to who was going to dig up which hole. Very true. But the point that they made was this gave an overall picture of what was going on in the community. And because we don't have that close investigation of what's going on in our council, in our hospitals, in our schools, and so on, is we don't get a feel for what is actually happening in our own backyard. Now, I have to say that Lewis, in some areas, is very good at having activists In other areas, we just let it go. And one of the things that I think that we do need to do is not go back, perhaps, to all the minutiae of minutiae, I think it's pronounced nowadays. I think that we don't need to go back to that in our local reporting, but what we do need to do is to keep an eye on everything that's going on locally. Because I'll give you an example, is I see now from the papers this morning that Birmingham has overtaken London as the worst city in the country for knifings. Young people fighting, well, not just young people, some old people as well, fighting with knives, killing one another, stabbing one another. Now, have we had stabbings in Lewes? Only one that I can recall in the last few months, but it's one, and we hadn't had one for a good many years that I can remember. One of the things that I think that we need to catalogue is the fact that from the groups there are little things that are happening. Cars vandalised, groups going around and yelling at people through their door late at night, a gang of girls going around wrecking stuff and attacking people in the streets. That sort of thing has started to grow. We may not have knifings, we may not have the sort of terrible crimes that are going on in the big cities, but crime here is growing. And the fact of the matter is, then we can put out a call to the local chief constable, who after all is based here, is, come on, start to do something about it before it gets out of hand. Now that's the sort of thing that local reporting, local items, local governance should be doing. And one copper told me that basically Lewes is a low crime area, so they move the coppers out. Let's wave a flag to all the criminals and say, no police around, come on, come on in. I mean, there was one, well, there have been two reports now. A lady who said that her son, who luckily was a rugby player and 6'4" and full of muscle, was threatened by somebody in a balaclava. Now, if that had been a lady, a little old lady, or for that matter a little old gentleman, that would have been very, very frightening. And we shouldn't let's knock it on the head now. We shouldn't let that get carried away to the point where we've got people able or think that they can wander around in balaclavas threatening people. And then there was another where a boy on the way home from school was attacked by two more youngsters who didn't even bother to disguise themselves. Now, those sort of things are beginning to grow. And is that an indicator to us that we should be aware of what's happening in our own backyard while we are looking and tutting about Birmingham and London, and undoubtedly Glasgow and Liverpool are suddenly going to creep into the statistics there. Southampton? I don't know. But we don't want it in our own backyard, and this is where, for once, I don't mind us being, is it a NIMBY, not in my backyard? No, we don't want that sort of violence in our backyard, and I would rather see that it was attacked and handled locally rather than put the resources into attacking it nationally. Is that selfish? Well, maybe, but after all, what we're trying to do is, in a small way, with television, and local radio, local groups, local investigative groups, and should be local councillors and local council groups, is we're trying to make our life here better. We are trying to make Lewes and its district, and for that matter, all the councils along the coast from Battle to Brighton, we're trying to make the towns and the community better to live in, to be a good place to live in. And if we don't attack some of these things, it is not going to be, is it? No, it is not. Well, there we go. Friday. I've had my rant. One thing that I'm feeling good about, though, is that we are beginning to start a debate. It's not happening in the council chamber. That's for sure. It's not happening in the council chamber. The so-called cabinet system has managed to mute that. What they've got is a bunch of people who, when they're told to, they stand up and vote without thinking. That's not on. That's not local governments. That's got to change. And that's where we start to put some pressure on. But also what's happening is that they're not keeping their eye on what's happening with the officials. I was astonished, absolutely astonished, to hear the governing party slip in how wonderful their executive was. Well, it's not. The place is a mess. And if you're propagating that myth to yourselves and you're believing it, then it is time for you to retire and go and do something else, because you're certainly not doing your job as councillors. Now, some of you have said, come on, Keith, there are very hard-working councillors, they're very good, nice people, and they're absolutely right. There are hard-working councillors, but I admire them for being a councillor, not for being part of a political party who are told not to dissent, who are told to vote when the boss tells them to vote, who are told to be chummy with the executive. That's not how the system works. And if that's what it's become, it's going to get worse and worse and worse, not better and better and better. So I would like people to join me, put our differences aside, because there are differences in our debate, but put our differences aside and make sure that what we've got is a good, solid citizen basis to ensure that we are properly governed at the executive level and the political level. Both have a responsibility. Both enter that as a career, and politicians enter it as a career, believe me. That they enter with the idea to make things better for their constituents, better for the voters, better for the taxpayers, and not to let things fester and decay and become as rotten as they seem to be now. Are they beyond redemption? I don't think so. I think it just needs somebody to prick their consciences and make them sit up instead of just doing what they feel like and how they feel like it. Well, never mind. Perhaps they're always taking me to court. Perhaps they should, a few more of us should threaten to be taken to court, and then a joint voice with the court making decisions about whether the behaviour of our politicians, local politicians, is just and sensible. Beep, 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 beep. Friday. It's Friday. And unfortunately, I'm afraid there's no rugby this weekend. What am I going to do? Oh, I'd better go to the pub anyway and see who's there and have a chat. You know, one of the freedoms that we have that a lot of countries that were under the old communist sway didn't have is they discouraged pubs and bars because that's where dissent starts. And in fact, today, if you go into a pub, you can hear many a barfly criticising what's going on, not only in national government, but local government. The only thing is, of course, is we're not activists. The local council doesn't have to be afraid of us being in pubs. But what I think that they've got to do is to start to think, where is dissent starting? And I think that it's in the local groups. I think it's in Lewis Eye, and I think that it's on Mirador Television and Rouser Radio. And if anybody else wants to start their own media group or company, I would welcome that. Even Town and County, the new magazine, splendid magazine, and comes through the door, even that took up the cudgel about the phones. Okay, in a light-hearted way. It was amusing, but nonetheless, it's a real issue. So if we all start to shout loud enough, perhaps we'll be heard. Then again, perhaps we won't. Perhaps we have to keep on thinking in terms of becoming activists. That's it for today. See you next week. For the moment, Keith Hayes, Rouser Radio from Lewis in East Sussex on the south coast, or near to the south coast of the UK. Till Monday, toodle pip.